Okay, welcome to June Gem 14, and this one is going to be all about Nintex Workflow tasks. So this is the on-prem environment, and we have a group down the bottom here called user interaction, and there's a number of different actions you can use to assign tasks to people. There's the assign flexi task, that's the most commonly used one. There's the assign to do task. There's also request approval, request data, and request review. So you're probably wondering which one do I use, when do I use it, all that sort of stuff. I'm going to start off with this one, given that that is the most commonly used one. So drag that onto the workflow design canvas, and I'm just going to double click to open it up. Now this allows you to do a whole bunch of stuff. This has things like, do we want to allow delegation? So do we want the user to be able to delegate a task that's been assigned to them? Do we want to allow lazy approval? That's the ability to respond to a task via just an email response with yes or no or approved or reject in the body, stuff like that. You have the ability to set other outcomes. Now the default ones are of course approve and reject, but you can add other outcomes, like for example, more info, and click on OK. Now there's my third outcome, and as soon as I click on save, you'll see another branch appears in the canvas. So now I can add actions to that one. Some of the other pieces of functionality that are really good is to look into, especially this behavior. Do you want the first person who responds to the task, that's what completes the task, or are you interested in, if you start assigning a task to multiple people, do they all have to agree on a specific outcome, for example, approved or reject or more info, etc. You also have the ability to set some permissions and do all that sort of stuff. And so check out the advanced options if you want to minimize your workflow design. You might want to just say don't create branches, include another other branch, and that's really good if you say everybody must agree, and if they don't agree, it's neither reject nor approve nor more info. It needs to go somewhere, so you can have an other branch as well. Okay, and then you've got things like the task notification that gets sent out, the not required task notification, and also things like reminders. So these are really important, especially if you want your tasks to move forward and your workflows to continue on and not get stuck on one particular task. These reminders are really good to get people to give them reminders to respond to a particular task. If they still don't respond though, there's an escalation option where I recommend not keeping it on none, put it on like delegate task or complete task, and maybe pass it off to somebody else if they still haven't responded, or just complete the task and just say rejected or something like that. And the final thing is editing the task forms with either InfoPath or Nintex Forms. Now I want you to remember the reminders part and the escalation, because that's going to be important in a moment. So this is one of the most commonly used actions, this flexi task. All right, let's get rid of that one and let's take a look at the next one, which is the assign to do task. Now what this does is it actually creates a content type, right? So, well, it actually lets you pick a content type. So you can create a content type with a bunch of fields that you want your user to select. So you can see you can create a new one, or you can use an existing one. And then what happens is when you select, and I don't have any in this particular site, but if you had some, you'd see the fields appear, and then you'd be able to say, I want you to go and fill in this particular content type and then get back all the data. So this is more like a data entry type form rather than a approve and reject type form. Again, you still have the options of everybody must respond or first response applies. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, the next one we have is the request approval. Now I'm going to drag that onto there. I still have the branches, right? Approved on the right, declined on the left. But when I open this up, you'll actually notice something a little bit different from the flexi-task action. This is still a approval type action, right? So you have similar options for behavior, still have delegation, lazy approval, reminders, task forms. But what you don't have is something called reminders or escalation. So what do you do when it comes to that? Well, down the bottom here, there's this thing called store action ID. This is not a task ID, this is something internal to Nintex. So you can come up here under variables and you can create yourself a new variable. We'll just call it a task action ID, and there's an action ID property right there. Close that, and store that in there. Now what you then do is, if you want reminders, is you use this parallel processing here. So it's parallel action. Drag the request approval onto one branch, and then on the other branch, we go to our user interaction and you drag a task reminder action. Right? Now the task reminder, you'll actually notice at the very top, there's an action ID and you can select your variable. Right? So this is smart enough to sit and wait for the task to be created before it starts actually doing the reminders and the calculations behind that. So there's something you can do around that. And then there's also, if it still hasn't been responded to, you can do this delegate workflow task. So let's drag that onto there. Again, you'll notice there's an action ID up here. Or if you don't want to delegate a task, you just want to complete the task, you can drag the complete workflow task. Again, this takes an action ID as well. So your action ID, and then you've got your ability to approve, reject, or continue. So you can see how all this is kind of built into that one flexi-task action, but depending on what you want to do, you may want to do something like this. Okay, let's get rid of that. Well, yeah, let's get rid of that. Okay, the next one we'll look at is the request data. The request data is very similar to the assign to do task action, except instead of you building the content type beforehand, this lets you actually build it right here, right? You can still use an existing one, but you can say my content type, oops, and I can click on, add field, etc. Right now, what it also lets you do is set the default value and actually get the data back. So pretty handy if you want to use that and assign tasks to people. This also has the ability to store the action ID, although don't really need it because it's got the reminders and escalations built into this. So don't really need the action ID anymore. Okay, so that was the request data. We've got the last one being the request review. This is more one of those actions where you want to just reach out to somebody and say, hey, you need to look into this particular document. It's been uploaded, and I just need to confirm that you've read it. Right? So they would get this task, they would click on it, they would say, read through a document, all good, come back to the task, and then they would say, click on a button that says complete task. Right? That's all it is. You don't really need them to actually fill in a form. You could potentially, given that you've got the ability to edit the task form, but this is more of a, I just need to make sure that you review the document and let me know when you've done that. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea of which task actions to use for what type of scenarios you guys need. There is also this create task action, but that's creating an exchange task. So not really a task that's running inside of SharePoint and letting you kind of monitor that. So it's more of just an Outlook exchange type task. Hope this is handy. If you have any questions, feel free to post it at the bottom of my blog post. Thanks for your time.